Hi, I'm Cerise Wright, president of Diverse Writers and Artists of Speculative Fiction. And today we're going to be talking about world building with our esteemed panel of L.H. Moore and William Jones. But first, I will let them introduce themselves.
Okay, you can go first.
Oh, thank you, I suppose. Hi, I'm LH Moore, and I primarily write short speculative fiction. You can find my work in numerous anthologies and publications such as Fireside, Apex, and Fire Magazine.
All right, and I'm William Jones. I'm primarily a researcher on the subjects of history, Afrofuturism, and things of that ilk. And I've written the ex-con Voodoo Priest, Goddess and the African King, and I'm currently working on my second book.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for joining us this evening. So let's get into it. World building. What is it? How do
Wow.
you define it?
Well, for me, I think it's just like it sounds. It's like you're creating something from nothing. I know, like when you're writing, you're still pulling in outside influences and experiences. However, I look at it as being a god, lowercase g, of course, where you are creating this world, where you're creating the rules, you're creating the people, you're creating the entire environment from scratch. And like I said, you are pulling in your own experiences, but it gives you this freedom to kind of do with it what you will. So that's what I look at, and that's what I imagine when I hear world building.
Do you have any rituals or prompts that you use?
For writing, usually the ritual is actually putting on a television show that I've seen many times over. So so I'll have background noise that will actually just kind of help me to concentrate. It's kind of weird. So I have some favorite shows of mine I've seen multiple times, and folks in the house, they know when certain shows are on. That must mean I'm writing because I put on the same shows over and over again. So that would be my thing in terms of a ritual.
What's one of your what's one of the shows?
Angel. I have
Okay.
seen that series from beginning to end multiple times. That's one of them. And now that Supernatural is finished, that's in my rotation as well.
Excellent. Luana?
Well, let's see. In terms of what world building is to me, I think about it as you are creating this literally creating a world and the environment that your characters are living in, and you really are thinking about everything involved with it, whether it's what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're smelling, tasting, touching, what they're moving through. And it's not even just a matter of just like this one character. You're thinking bigger than just that. You're also thinking, okay, well, what kind of political system does this world operate under? What kind of rules do they have to live by? What is the culture that this character is either a part of or involved with? There's so much that you have to think about when you're creating a world, when you're creating the story, because you're asking your readers to come into it, to step into it, and to be able to envision it through this character's eyes. And you do realize it's almost like having this really huge responsibility, because you realize that if there's something wrong with that world or something doesn't really sit right, then that's something that can take the reader out of the story. And, all of us have experienced that at some point where you're like, wait, what? No, that doesn't work. That disbelief or that aspect of that world being almost wrong can really, really make your story either problematic or one that just doesn't work. And that's not really what I'm sure you want to accomplish as an author. And for me, I don't know how many other people like that. I know I see it as a movie in my mind. And so it's almost like I'm seeing it all in my mind. I'm experiencing it in my mind. And I just need to get down.
Right.
And some of the stories that I've written have been historical in nature. And for me, in that case, it means that the research, the history, has helped really inform that world, because sometimes they always say you can't write anything that's wilder than what's happened in real life. And that's so true, especially when you're talking about something like history. And, it's something that you can really pull from, you can use, even if you're talking about the future, because you might be talking about something that's in the future, but you have to be able to use something as your model for it.
Right.
So,
So what are your prompts or visual aids that will help you?
I can't say it's necessarily a prompt or visual aid per se. As I said, I like to think about, like, for instance, if I'm talking, if it's historical, for instance, that world, that era itself helps act as the prompt. Um, if it's not, or I'm looking at something that's entirely fantasy, you're taking into account, okay, what is going on? What am I trying to do here in terms of what I'm trying to create? And it's not necessarily like fitting the character to the world. It's really just thinking about it almost like this holistic way of it's everything. It's just everything. I can't say I necessarily have an
Surround
answer.
sound.
Yeah. You that's why I think, when you talk about writers being like in the zone, or you really need to focus on your writing. I can't have other things going on, other people talking to me, because it's like in my mind, I'm trying to be in that world myself, kind of
I'm
thing.
like that. I can't listen to music or television. I have
Yeah.
to be focused on that. And I think what helped me write my first book, I was cyberpunk. So I read a lot of cyberpunk. I thought about it. I copied it down because I heard, the famous poet. I think he liked Fitzgerald, and he used to write out passages of that. So I
Mhm.
tried that, and that helped me get in the zone as well. So yeah, it is a surround sound, for me at least. What about writing between genres like horror, science fiction, fantasy? Do you have any different ways of writing those, world building in those different worlds?
I think you probably got to start off with the rules of your
Yes.
world. That I think is the biggest challenge
Your
because
internal structure.
right,
Hmm.
because as you stated, you're bringing these folks in and you're saying this is my world, but at the same time you have to establish rules and you have to constantly remind yourself to stay within the parameters of those rules. Because whatever the rules are, folks are gonna go along with it, no matter how outlandish it might be. But the moment you do something else later on down the line, then it loses credibility. So I think with horror and science fiction, the challenge is creating those rules and you yourself sticking to those rules as you write. So you don't want you might paint yourself into a corner, with your protagonist, and you're like, well, how's he going to get out of this? How's she going to get out of this? Then you want to make up something that doesn't make any sense. Like all of a sudden now they're bulletproof, where they weren't bulletproof before. So that's the one thing you have to be careful of, because when you're reading a story or you're watching a story, the moment that happens, it'll take you right out of it.
And
And
I think you have to
that's so
establish that
important.
that confidence early on, establish a solid world, because when the reader first comes in, they're a little trepidatious. They want to make sure that the writers know what they're doing, so that you can take them by the hand and take them on this journey. And if the ground is shifting, if your plot's not quite right, they're going to pull out of it.
Right.
Well, that's why the rules are so important. That's the first thing I thought too, Will, is that every genre has expectations. And for, especially if you love the genre,
Right.
then what those rules are. And it's okay to be different within it. It's okay to do different things within it. That's fine. But in the end, it still follows their particular rules. It's like for romance, you're not going to have romance without a happily ever after.
Right.
If
Right.
you do not have a HEA at the end of a romance,
Right.
then your readers might be coming after you with like, torches and pitchforks or something, because that's not the way it works.
Right.
Now the thing is though is that slipping in between and in and out of the different genres, even within one story, you can do that, And I think, for instance, that's one great thing I've seen in terms of like Black speculative fiction writers is that often there's this blending going on of like fantasy and horror and sci-fi just kind of going back and forth. And I'm loving it because, I sometimes feel like it's almost like we're doing our own thing. Maybe it's from having been marginalized in a way so long within, this publishing sphere that it's almost like we're going to do what we want.
Right.
Marginalized and categorized.
Yeah.
You have to write in this and you can't write anything else.
Yeah.
And
I just really feel it's like, do your own thing and somebody's going to love it.
Right. And I also think when you talk about Black speculative fiction and this blending of genres, I think like our culture and our existence also speaks to that. Like the average Black person, at least in my experience, within their life, all of those elements are present anyway. Like I can't, if you got roots from the deep South, you got some supernatural stories that somebody told you growing up. You know what I'm saying? No matter what,
Yes.
As a Black person, your existence borders on horror many times. You look at being pulled over by the cops, that's a horror story in the making. It's just that you survive at the end, hopefully. So I think that our lives, our existence brings together so many of these different things. Like for example, I remember when Get Out came out, those were stories we kind of told each other. Well, that's what they do to us, kind of a thing. So that's why we were so able to relate to it when we saw it, because those were stories being told in our community anyway. So I think our existence speaks to all of those different genres coming together.
Excellent. So, well, Zoom is telling me we only have 10 minutes. So what elements of world building do you think are the most important to address when you're world building?
Wow. I think in a way, the setting, just the world itself. And, for instance, I think somebody who is just like a master of it is N.K. Jemisin. And, when you read her Broken Earth trilogy, one of the things that you realize you had to kind of really get a grasp on from the very beginning was the world itself. Was the world itself. You had to really kind of get an understanding of, wait, this is what has happened. This is what is going on. These are the different places within it. Having that setting, that full world that you're immersed in from the get-go, I think is so important.
For me, it's kind of weird, but when I can hear it while I'm reading it, that kind of, you did like that works. Sometimes, you get caught up in these stories and you can actually hear the music, you can hear the sounds, you can hear the experiences and so forth. And that for me tells me it's working. So I think if you're able to get the reader to actually hear what's taking place and hear the voice the way you want it to sound, because all too often when we're reading, we hear our own voice in our head. But if I can get you to hear the voice I want you to hear and it doesn't sound like you when you're reading it, then I also think that makes it that much more effective.
I also think, as a general rule, you should include the senses in your writing, not only seeing, but tasting, touching, smelling, feeling. And I think that helps to pull the writer into your story as well. And there's so many flavors of Black speculative fiction that we put in our writing, and it's just there for everyone to enjoy.
Yeah, we have a deep well to draw from, that's for certain.
Yeah.
Amen to that.
And it's funny, you look at these experiences that we have, even in our day-to-day living, we have these unique perspectives on things. And I think that adds to our ability to tell these stories. You look at what's going on in 2020, in as much as the whole country, if not the world, is feeling it, it's feeling different for us. We're having different conversations about what took place in 2020 and what's happening in 2021. And I think it's that way of looking at the world that really, like you said, allows for that deeper well than you'll find in other, coming out of other communities.
All right. Any other final thoughts?
Well, I just want to say thank you, first of all, for having me be part of this conversation, and I hope that I was able to, contribute something to it.
Where can we find you?
Oh, Afrofuturism. You can find me on Instagram on the Afrofuturism Network. You can find me on Facebook, the same. You can also find me on Twitter, Afrofuturism Network, and AfrofuturismNet.com. And hopefully this year we will have GrioCon that I'm putting together with Mr. Chad Eric Smith of Mr. Duke Productions in Silver Spring, Maryland this September.
And you can find me at lhmorecreative.com. I'm on Twitter, tweet away at LHMELLEHM, or on Instagram at LH_more.
Thank you very much. I'm Cerise Wright, a president of Diverse Writers and Artists of Speculative Fiction. You can find us online at dwasf.org. And thank you to our panelists, and good night.